have the pleasure again of inviting a student on the stage. So we are going to absolutely have to give her the most love. This is Saanvi. I am so lucky. We did a webinar a couple weeks ago on like civics and democracy and generative AI. And Saanvi was our student that I was connected to, and I was just absolutely blown away by her thoughtfulness. I know I wasn't the only one, and her just awareness of what this moment in time means from the perspective of a 19-year-old student, but also as a thinker ahead. And so Saanvi's going to give you a moonshot, but a very, like, in this case, it's going to be one in which we can get to pretty quickly. And I think it's one that's really important. So Saanvi, thank you so much. You want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Amanda. I'm so excited to be here. And yeah, I can share my screen really quick while I introduce myself. But my name is Saanvi. I'm currently a sophomore at UC Berkeley, and I'm studying computer science and public policy there. I'm an undergraduate student, and I'm also the executive director of an organization called the Youth Power Project, which is focused on bringing more young people into civic spaces, particularly policy spaces. And I guess my kind of entrance into this was when I was in middle and high school. I was probably the most like civically apathetic person you probably could have ever met. I didn't really know how like government institutions worked. I was learning about it in school, but I was kind of learning about it more passively. And I think I also keenly remember, because I was in the 7th grade during the 2016 election, that there was a very overwhelming consensus between me and my peers that there's no room or reason for our civic engagement or our engagement in most civic or community processes. So apart from like just pre-registering to vote or volunteering, there didn't really seem like there was much that we could actually do to impact decision makers or reach decision makers at our school district or in the state or federally, and they felt very far away from us. But this kind of all changed for me when I was able to kind of like take some of the experiences that I had as a young kid and use that to inform certain policy measures that were going through the California state legislature, and learning how to leverage like these kinds of civic institutions in such a personal way as early as high school was absolutely transformative for me. And like being able to directly immerse myself in my community was and witnessing the reality of what I'd only otherwise really learned about in the classroom was absolutely transformational. So when I think about education, I really think about how that particular learning experience for me that wasn't traditional, like in the classroom, but being able to realize that like what I was learning in the classroom actually had weight and ground in the world around me. And so that got me really passionate about just getting other young people involved in civic spaces, and why I kind of have been kind of talking a lot about civic engagement and youth democratic participation in the context of the digital age, because so much of my generation's engagement with community or perception of community has been shaped by our digital civil discourse, which ultimately is very intertwined with education systems and also with technology that's been advancing. One other thing about me is that I'm the number one biggest ice cream fan. I always need a sweet treat at the end of every day. I love rainbow sprinkles. I put them on everything. I carry a box of rainbow sprinkles with me, so I don't have to pay an extra 50 cents to add my own toppings. Then I can add as many as I want. So yeah, I'm excited. As I was talking about before, feelings of inclusion amongst American citizens continue to deteriorate. And I can say that particularly with my generation, having gone through the pandemic and not having really witnessed like an election that wasn't so heavily publicized in the news or politicized. It's really hard for a lot of people my age, and something that I've noticed amongst my peers, to feel connected to the idea of community and to feel inclusion in the fullest sense. And, we can say that a lot of people have been talking about how a substantial portion of Americans don't believe that they have a say in government. A lot of American citizens just do not see themselves trusting institutions around them. This statistic right here, just 18% believe that the government actually cares what the public thinks. But I do want to say that amongst my generation, there has been this interesting perception that we're very civically apathetic, but it's not that we're apathetic. In fact, I think more than ever, people in my generation are energized, are understanding and perceiving the issues around them, and care very deeply about those issues. It's about finding avenues to actually realize where that kind of engagement or that kind of care can be transformative from an educational and also from like a human context. So young people feel unprepared generally to participate in civic life and distrust institutions. A lot of young people say that they would want to take more action in their communities and be more ingrained in these different institutions and pay more attention in school if they had the opportunity to or saw a pathway for themselves to do so. But ultimately, what do we see young people turning to? We see them turning to online discussion forums, to online communities and digital platforms to find what they otherwise aren't able to or don't feel connected to in person. There have been a ton of benefits with like the movement online to talking about civics and talking about to even like connecting online through social media platforms. One being obviously the democratization of information. You're able to digest and consume information at a much quicker rate than ever before. You're able to perceive issues that are detached from you geographically at the drop of a hat when they happen in real time. You can connect with communities that aren't located near you. And that ties into a lot of people having a new safe haven for expression online, being able to find a place to connect with people who might share experiences as you that you might not otherwise have been able to meet, and also live a more authentic version of yourself in that sense. And finally, awareness and access to civic spaces. I think that social media has been like transformative in how people engage and organize on causes that they care about, and raising awareness on these problems. Not only are we able to access different kinds of information, different perspectives, but also different avenues for turning those lived experiences into tangible changes that can actually change your day to day. But at the same time, we've seen a few harms. I think mis and disinformation is the first one that comes to mind, and that's something a lot of people are talking about in the context of this election is how do you empower users to actually understand like what is and isn't real and how to exercise their free speech responsibly. Second is toxic polarization. We've seen that a lot of algorithms online tend to reward content that is more politicized or more charged, and that creates a race to the top to create content that is polarizing or potentially harmful. And finally, limited comprehension of reality. I think this is a funny one that I always laugh when I look at this icon, but what I mean by that is social media is an echo chamber. Digital spaces are an echo chamber, and something that a lot of young people, especially people that I talk to who are my age and currently students, that we find ourselves falling into that trap of being online, being chronically online, and really only viewing the world through the lens that we are receiving that information through this digital filter. And that has been an interesting debate. So what I really wanted to like talk about with my moonshot is there are so many benefits to social media. There are so many benefits to digital civil discourse, particularly in the context of education. But how can we ensure that like these platforms are actually able to realize these benefits while mitigating these harms? I think that we talk about that whole entire debate, that whole topic of how do we make social media better? Social media has been incredible. How do we make it realize its true potential? But we talk about that through different silos. We talk about it through the silo of education. We talk about that through the silo of policy. And then we also talk about it through the silo of technology. And obviously, with regards to AI related harms, when we're talking about the way content online is classified, there's a huge debate about like what bright line there is to actually classify that content. Like, should you actually penalize people if you're not sure the intent behind the misinformation that they're putting online? Or how do you limit the use of generative AI or manipulated media to misrepresent the actions of public figures and ultimately cultivate more distrust in institutions, right? Especially in the context of an election, how do you ensure that you're flagging content that and disclosing when political ads feature AI generated content? Also looking at different circuit breakers to flag posts that are fast spreading because posts that are more polarizing tend to become viral more quickly. And finally, also ensuring that users have basic guidance on perceiving artificial versus authentic content. We talk about media literacy, AI literacy, and information literacy. I think that's key. Users should definitely understand and be empowered to decide how they consume that content and how they perceive it. But obviously, due diligence from these platforms only works when users actually understand their obligations to interact responsibly. So that's kind of where I also think about education. It's kind of a cyclical concept. It's like civic engagement is key to your education, but education is key to ensuring that you can effectively be civically engaged. Cultivating responsible user engagement does begin in the classroom, where students are oftentimes first beginning to perceive their role as citizens in these kinds of forums. And I oftentimes see media literacy, AI literacy, and information literacy being talked about in the context of social sciences classes. But I think it's even more important that across the board on all subject matters that we're talking about what it means to behave responsibly and share information responsibly. I mean, how to interact with the new digital ecosystem where all this information is being shared. So our civics education, I think our education system more broadly has to keep up with the transition from in-person to digital forums for civic dialogue and explore different dynamic opportunities for that kind of engagement. So that being said, I've kind of talked a lot about, education. I've talked about a little bit about technology and a little bit about policy too. I think policy kind of intersects all of this. But for me, I think what would be interesting for me as a student particularly is to see a more interdisciplinary forum to bring together technologists, to bring together students, to bring together educators into a more representative discussion on what effective user consultation and feedback integration can look like in social media platforms, and ultimately what the role of community institutions, what the role of educators, parents, etc., are in actually empowering young people, empowering users through education, transparency, and digital agency to make decisions and ultimately create that safer digital information ecosystem that we want. Because I think that when we're talking about healthy civic participation, that begins with creating trust. And creating trust begins with transparency and feeling that you can actually relate to the institutions that you're interacting on, and also that those institutions are acting in your greater net interest. So I'll close this off by saying that I like to refer to the term digital natives, i.e. young people. We keenly understand the harms and benefits associated with our digital engagement online, with the way that we learn. We know why we turn to certain platforms and how those impacts or the shifting nature of education has spilled over within our civic and daily lives. I can remember what my education was like before all my friends were on Instagram or on a phone. But when digital platforms can safely realize their fundamental intent, they can create these opportunities for trust and meaningful connection. And I think realizing that intent begins with actually consulting users and consulting young people in the design of these algorithms, in being able to selectively choose how these algorithms impact them, et cetera. I think the upcoming 2024 election season, and I know we just have been having some more political conversations recently about the role of social media at large. I think we're in a key moment right now. We have a key opportunity for these sectors to converge around these best practices for effective online engagement, and to ensure that we're able to I want all students to be able to achieve that kind of transformational educational experience that I had by being civically engaged, more community minded. So that being said, let's stop working in silos. This is a link to the Power Project, which is the organization I work with. We've been doing a lot at this intersection and convergence, and there's my email for contact. But it was really great to have the opportunity to present to you all, and I really appreciate your time.